So this is our horticulture hour, the Stump the Chump hour. It's a time for you to send your questions in. You can send them in. Just type them into the chat. Would be fine. So I'm Mark Weathington, director of the JCRA Arboretum. I'm joined by Dennis Carey, who is our curator here, Tim Alderton, who's our horticultural specialist, and Sophia McCusker, another horticultural specialist, who is our nursery supervisor. And right on time, the train is coming by. The 3:00 train comes by every 3:00, so we know we're starting on time. So I think some of my colleagues have brought in a couple of things to talk about, and then we'll start taking your questions.
Or are there any questions?
Are there questions to start already?
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay, we'll talk about a couple of plants.
Yours, Dan?
Yeah, I'll start first. So
You need your mic.
we were asked to bring some show and tell items of some things that we think look really good in the garden right now. I brought clippings from 2 different trees. I've been walking by these trees all summer, enjoying the seeds that have grown and are starting to mature. They've been green for a long time. They're starting to brown up. But on these 2 plants, the seeds hang down in these long clusters, and they're very, very attractive. And so I thought I would share them with y'all today. So this one here is Tarakaria Rohifolia, and don't worry about it. I'm going to give Blake the names. He can type these in. Both of these are kind of long, hard names. So it's called the Japanese wingnut. Here's the seed pod. These are the wingnuts. It's, kind of a double winged, you can't really tell, but a double winged version of a maple seed. And they're very attractive. So they've been green for a long time. They've just started to brown up. I'm going to get my seed collection team on these. So we'll have them for next year's member seed distribution. And this is a medium-sized deciduous tree, very pretty. Rohifolia means pomegranate leaved. It is a relative of walnuts. It's in the Juglandaceae family. All right, that's my first show and tell. My second one is another similar one, and it's shedding its seeds like crazy. And it is a maple, and it's also got these long chains of seeds that have been browning up recently, and they're very attractive. And this is Acer Caudadifolium. Caudate refers to a tail. It's referring to the tip of the leaf here, which is a nice long tail-like leaf tip. This is a small deciduous tree as well. Both of these would be good in a modern small landscape. Very attractive trees, and you'll get to enjoy the helicopter seeds. It's a very nice show for the summer and into the fall. So that's my show and tell.
I love these trees. I love both of them. Only thing I'll add to the Tarakaria Rohifolia, Tarakaria, that's PT, as Blake will put in, but that refers to, it's a winged caria. Caria is hickory, is what that means. So like pterodactyl, Tarakaria. So you have these little winged rachis. This is one leaf, and the leaflets are on this little are on this rachis or stem that's wing. But the thing that I really want to mention, and this plant is not easily available, but it is one of the single fastest growing deciduous trees for the garden. It grows fast. In fact, when a big oak came down here at the Arboretum that was shading part of our collection, sitting right in front of us right now, well, the oak isn't. The oak was gone. It came down in an ice storm, and the plant that was planted there to replace it was a different species of Tarakaria fraxinifolia, one that has ash-like leaves. And that was planted because we knew it would get big quick and provide some of that shade that we had lost when the oak went down.
That one was grown from seed in 2006. And it's, I don't know, 45, 50 feet tall,
Yeah.
Yeah.
at least. Yeah,
It is.
very fast growing.
And this was another one we planted to block a view.
Yeah.
So,
And the maple is also quite vigorous in how when it was young, it was growing 3-4 feet a year easy. So it's another fast one, but it's a much smaller growing tree, really nice one for the, and has nice bark. It's one of the striped maples.
We got a question right off relevant to the Tarakaria. Someone's asking if that will lace the soil with juglones.
no.
No. Okay.
The squirrels do like the little nutlets, though.
Yeah.
So, do you want to go or do you want me to go? I brought two different things in reality. The first one I'm going to show you is, and we're coming into the season for them, is a type of camellia. And I have to, the name on this one I'm not good with, but this is Camellia Rubberaki. I can't spit it up. It's Robiraki. It's, I'm assuming, Rubberaki. It's a hybrid camellia between Camellia japonica, and I saw variations on the subspecies rusticana or decana. Okay, so rusticana, then and Camellia sinensis, the T. So a standard japonica type camellia that flowers mostly winter, spring. With a summer or late fall, or late summer, fall flowering species of Camellia sinensis, the tea camellia. And it doesn't have a big spectacular flower like the japonicas, but it has a bigger flower than most of the sinensis, and it's earlier. And most of your sinensis, though some of them are pink, this one is a nice pale pink. And the thing going for this one is supposedly it can flower as early as July. Ours has just begun flowering now here, the mid to late August. Supposedly a relatively small grower, so it will fit in most gardens. They're not 100% sure how big it'll get, but maybe a 5 or 6 foot tall plant. Our plant's about 3.5, 4 feet tall. So really nice foliage on it, and early for a camellia, not the most spectacular flowering one, but a really interesting one to grow. And the other thing,
Before you go, thanks to my my good friend Google,
okay,
I can tell you that Roboraki translates to opening the winter
tea
kettle, and it's the opening of the tea new year.
Yeah,
So
the
when
tea
the
ceremony.
tea that's picked early in this in the previous spring, the new growth is settled out and they make it into the matcha powder. So that's at this time of year. So that's why the early flowering. So.
The other thing I brought are just a selection of Abutilons. I love Abutilons. They flower for so long for us here in the garden. And I brought, I think, 4 different ones here, but I won't go through them all. But just Abutilons in general have been a really good plant for us here the last several years. Or at least we have several selections now in the garden that have been doing very well. And these are some of them here. So Ruffles, Orange Hot Lava, just a straight Megapotamicum, and one called Voodoo. But I was just recently able to acquire some new ones when I was out and on a trip. So I don't know how they're going to do here, but they were from the West Coast, but we're going to see how they do here next year in the garden. There's some of the larger flowered ones, more like the size of this Voodoo, which is a bit larger flower than the Megapotamicum hybrids, but we're going to see. So.
And in case it's already in the question, yes, deer like them.
I mean, look at how tasty they look.
The rabbits haven't devoured them all through the garden, though. So
trust me,
vigorous.
I like Abutilon too.
Yeah,
Deer like them.
This is something I was cutting back in the nursery that has been blooming, and I kind of let it take over because it was really pretty. It's a clematis with a really small, delicate flower, Clematis glauca. I didn't look anything up about this particular, where this came from or anything. So
I think it's a Chinese species.
It's Chinese.
These are Asian
yeah.
species, maybe widely Asian, Russia, China.
I really liked the contrast of the flowers and the seed heads. Yeah, there's something cool I found.
It's not a common species, but you can get a similar one. In fact, I think we sold a similar one, Clematis tangutica, and there's one that's called My Angel that I believe we had in one of our sales recently. That's got a very similar flower, and I've got that one, the My Angel, growing on a Alyssium Murasaki nosato that flushes out with new growth that's dark purple before going green, and every time after the first flush in the spring of new growth on my Alyssium, I cut it back. And so I get 2 or 3 flushes because I keep cutting it back all season. And so right now I've got this dark purple foliage with these soft little yellow flowers on it and the silvery white seed heads on there. And what's great about a lot of these, especially the small flowered clematis, a lot of them are late season bloomers. I never can remember the pruning categories.
3, I think. Yeah.
You cut them back to the ground in winter or spring, and then let them grow all season, and they flower. And it's, you're getting these diagrams of trimming clematis, and these are the ones you don't have to think about.
Yeah.
And they also, because you're cutting them back every year, and usually the tops die back, they don't take over. So they're perfect for what I always talk about, growing through shrubs and plants and things like that. Now, is that one in our sale?
I added it to our list.
So I said Clematis glauca is not easy to come by, but it will be on our sale list. So keep an eye out on the night.
Okay. So let's get started with some questions. There was one that was given to us by Johnny Combs right before we got started, and I really like it. Here it goes. Who is ready for fall and who hates to see summer fade?
I'm definitely ready for fall, and I will not be sorry to see summer go. I'm looking forward to that first weekend in October that you can sleep overnight with your windows open, get that cool air into the house and get some fresh air. That first 45, 50 degree night. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Does that happen in October?
Yeah, first, second week of October usually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right when the fair. It's always the fair.
That's third, second,
It
third.
gets warm again after that, but
I'm out of the country then. I very much try not to wish away my time because it goes so quickly. There's so many. I'm still trying to get caught up with the spring stuff I was going to do in my garden. But I do always look forward to fall because I do a lot of traveling in the fall, and this year's no different. And so I am looking forward to that because it's been a couple of years since I've been able to go out and collect plants in Asia. So I'm looking forward to that. But I still love the summer. I love to garden in the summer.
For me, yeah, I'm kind of like Mark. I don't look forward to the fall necessarily, because it's what comes after it. It's the dark days of winter get me. I need sunlight, especially when I go home in Western Pennsylvania for a few weeks in December and November. No sunlight there. So that just means that's coming. But I love summer, and the heat, really doesn't bother me too much, though. I do vegetate on the weekends, as I say, stay inside a lot, but I'm outside every day. So I just enjoy the warm weather. And so, yeah.
I don't like being cold. So I like what fall brings, but I wouldn't say I don't like to look forward to it because I know, like Tim said, that's what comes next is
the dark.
For me, it's cold. For me, it's just cold.
I actually love the garden in the fall and going into winter. I love cutting it back. I love getting it cleaned up. I love getting it all tidy again. That gives me a lot of satisfaction. Doing that. Although, we don't really put garden to bed around, down here because there's always stuff growing and happening, things popping up and things flowering. Yeah, the Abutilons, will flower as long as it's,
15.
What's that?
About 15 or 20.
Yeah. They really will. So, and of course, camellias and those kinds of things. So they really goes all season. And Some of the winter flowering things I can actually smell, the Daphnes and things like that. So.
Yeah, I do love Daphne and Edgeworthia because it means we're like over the hump.
Supposedly that's supposed to be
gonna
fragrant. I can't smell it right now, but
So we have 3 heat lovers and 1 cold lover.
No, I am not a heat lover,
no.
Not a heat lover.
but I can live with it.
Same here. It's just the dark that gets me.
I wear shorts all the way through the winter. So.
I'm a plant. I photosynthesize.
Don't understand.
Okay. So Don Chernoff asks an interesting question. If plants like blackberries and blueberries evolve tasty fruit to help animals spread their seeds, why do blackberries have so many thorns that make it so hard to get to the berries? It seems self-defeating.
I don't say, well, it all depends. Sometimes there are adaptations that were beneficial that don't harm the plant's reproductive success and so haven't gone away. But birds eat a lot and small mammals eat a lot of the berries on brambles. And those thorny branches are great for nesting in. They're great for protection.
Yeah, I was going to add that I feel like the way that animals move, like if you ever watch an animal move through brambles, I feel like the blackberries are defending against us and not necessarily the creatures.
I mean, the birds are going to be great distributors of them.
Yeah.
I mean, bears and stuff will eat them too, and they'll also distribute them too. And they have that thick fur. They kind of have the same thing, and they're not going to go after them until they're perfectly ripe.
Yeah. Well, and I have dogs that will run through brambles without thinking twice about it.
Thick fur.
So
keep us out.
It doesn't necessarily hurt the animals. Certainly not the bears. They're not.
No, they could care less.
So interesting thing about this is one of my favorite things. Interesting about fruit dispersal and animals. I had somebody ask me, what is the purpose of like an avocado where you have a single huge seed in this big thing, or an Osage orange, which if you know an Osage orange, they're hard as rocks and they're huge and they grow, through good part of the eastern half of the country. And we used to have megafauna. We had sloths and mastodons, giant sloths, not the little ones,
Car size.
Yes.
car-sized ones, 800 pounds, and these massive horned animals, antelopes and type things and moose type things. And those seeds move through those megafauna's gut just fine, just like little blackberry seeds do through a bird or even easier through a bear. So, but again, they didn't then evolve to not have big seeds because they were still dispersing okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not been long enough to present to these megafauna have been dead for 10,000 years or 5,000 years or 15,000 years, something that's long for us, but very short in evolutionary time. And so they haven't had a chance to adapt yet fully.
Yeah. Less than 15,000, because that's about when 15,000 people had crossed the Bering Strait and were in North Carolina. So 13 to 15.
I think it's even earlier now. But
it's 25,000 across the Bering. Yeah. So.
Okay, that was fun. That was a good exploration of evolutionary ecology. Okay, Lena White's asking, I have a climbing rose that was blooming when planted 2 years ago, but hasn't bloomed at all since. I don't remember the name. Planted on an east-facing side of the house. What should I do for it?
So, the biggest thing with roses, with roses in general, sunlight. They want sunlight, period. Climbing roses do not flower well when they're going up. That is not how they flower when they go horizontal. Kind of like apples. Apples flower and fruit better when they're more on the horizontal. So when you're growing climbing roses, you want to get it going up, but then you really want to get branches going sideways. And you can do it, let it just kind of cascade, and that's fine. But if you're growing it on the side of your house and you basically espalier it, put it up on your house and really go horizontal, you'll get just loads of flowers across the top if it's getting enough sun. And then what you do is the vertical shoots that come off of those horizontals as it's growing, you trim those back each year, each winter, and you really just leave the main vertical and the horizontals that you want. And you can keep going up and going more horizontals, but that is really what will do it for your climbing rose more than anything is growing them horizontal.
Another thing, I wonder if it's a remontant flowering one, or if it's a once flowering one, and if you're pruning it at the wrong time.
Yeah.
If you say prune it in the winter and it's a one and only flowers on the previous year's growth.
Yeah, that is true. If it's something like a Lady Banks rose, which would only flower in the spring anyway, if you cut it back, in winter,
Controlling it,
control the size, big one. Yeah, you will cut off the flowers, and some of the, especially the species types, that's likely to be happening. So if you're reading rose pruning and it's really for the modern climbing roses, and not for what you have, but if you have a modern climbing rose, that's your issue is how it's growing.
Awesome. Here we have another question from Lena. I have a small newly planted Cercis rising sun that has small rounded bites from almost all of the leaves. Beetle or caterpillar? What should I do?
Could be leaf cutter bees.
Leaf cutter bees.
Yeah, you'll occasionally see them in the spots in the garden. It's probably, unless it's really bad, that's not going to hurt them.
It's late in the season too, so foliage is getting ready to fall.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, this one's from Johnny Combs.
And let us know about Monday too.
Cestrum auranticum, planted in huge planter. Very few blooms. All other tropicals in my full sun garden are great bloomers. Any suggestions for why it has so few bloom?
For fertilize?
Yeah, I'm assuming if it's in a great big planter, and it came from us, it's probably several. So it's probably older. And so if it's been in a container for a long time, it may need to be fertilized. It may need to be repotted, soil, that type of thing, because usually they flower as long as they get sun.
It flowers from May until November. At least Parkii. I don't know Aurantiaca.
Aurantiaca isn't quite as much of a flowering machine, but it's not a whole lot different than Parkii. Often confused with it.
Okay, this one looks like a lot of fun. This is from Omar. Looking for suggestions for evergreen plants that bloom at different times of the year so I can mix and match to have some flowers at different times.
Camellia, Daphne. Camellia, Daphne. Those are two
Sun, shade.
mine right away.
Yeah, what's the lighting? We know what lighting?
I assume just all lightings. This is for a whole garden.
So, as Dennis said, you get camellias that are starting now and going through all the way through spring. There's some great evergreen magnolias. One that we helped get into the trade is Serendipity, but Eternal Spring, which was bred here in North Carolina, flowers for a long time from late winter through spring. Any of the Magnolia labifolias, Daphne, as you said, are great.
Coming into the osmanthus season for fragrance in particular. I mean, they're not spectacular in flower, but the aroma is enough. Spectacular. The orange ones, because you notice, and the white ones often blend in.
Ones that are coming out with double-sized flowers and more numbers of flowers.
Yeah, so there's a lot in the osmanthus, and that's both. You can get flowers fall and spring with them. More sun. Abelia is nice and evergreen forest, flowers over most of the summer, and makes it a great plant.
A lot of abuse.
Sarcococa, not super showy.
No, but wonderfully fragrant again. And at a time of the year you don't think about it.
Yeah. Although I have never smelled a Sarcococa in my life. That is a fragrance that I have never smelled. And
I smell it.
I still think maybe it's a big con people are running. It's
Gardenia?
Yeah, definitely.
Real favorite around here.
They're
rosemary?
Rosemary, yeah.
Depending, you didn't say
Laura petalums. But rosemary, definitely.
If you don't prune it, Laura petalum.
Yeah. I mean, there are just so many. What I'd say is come out here. If you're not close by, go to whatever botanic garden you're close to and visit all through the year. And you will see things that are looking great all through the year. Because we could really go on. We've already mentioned Elysiums, and there are shrubby evergreen dogwoods, and it's just the lists go on and on and on.
And I always forget about things like this time of the year. I always forget about what actually flowers in the spring. And then it comes through in the spring and I'm like, oh yeah.
Rhododendron, or depending either big leaf ones or the azaleas.
That's what I was going to mention. The evergreen rhododendron, the evergreen azaleas, but also there are rhododendron species, big leaf ones that grow well here, and they're being used in breeding. Some of the southern living plants that they have. What's the series?
Southgate,
Breezy, Southgate, other things, Brandy. Those have been really good. Black Hat is one.
The recurrent flowering azaleas, like darn, I just lost it. Oh, thank you. And the Blumethons and
Perfecto Mundo.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So Carol and Neil are asking, my agastache plants get very leggy by the end of summer, but the hummingbirds still love it. How can I make them bushier?
Prune them in earlier in the season. Do a mid-season partial cutback.
Yeah.
Cut back to the nodes.
Sometimes it's just better to, sacrifice some flowers now for better look later. Not now, but as you're going through, they'll put out they'll be really showy in bloom, or even before they start flowering, trim them back a couple of times, and that'll get them to bush out early, and they won't get as tall and they won't be as leggy. The other thing is to plant some, things that are popping up and looking good late season that are small around them to kind of hide those bare legs.
And they will do well in leaner conditions too. So if you over fertilize them, you'll get taller, floppier plants.
Yeah.
Okay. Jean Davis is asking, I have an Aphrodite, I assume she means Calycanthus, that is very healthy but had very few blooms this year. If I cut it way back, will it bloom more next summer?
I probably wouldn't want to cut it back hard because you'll miss the earlier season flush. And Aphrodite will repeat a tiny bit, but I would probably do minimal pruning now and wait to prune it until after it's done its main display.
Yeah. And I think if you do a hard cut, you're going to have you may have 2 seasons where it doesn't really flower well because it's a big plant. And it wants to put out some vegetative growth. So, if it starts getting shaded, it'll flower less, but, do a soil test, see what the fertility's like around there.
And how, did she say how old it was? If it's just a recently planted plant, it could be still settling in and very vigorous yet. Once after a couple of years, they settle in, a lot of times things will flower better because they aren't so vigorous.
For most plants, it's that third year when they really start doing their thing. The first year, they're not quite as vigorous and they're just settling in. The second year, they're really putting on vegetative growth. And it's the third year that they really start looking beautiful. And I should amend that. That's if you plant in the spring. If you plant now, you usually can cut a year off of that because you've got right now is ideal. Because the soil is warm, plants will get in there, they will put roots out into the soil. Tops won't do a whole lot right now, but that rooting out, it gives it a little more winter wet tolerance for things that can be iffy with that going into the winter. And then in the spring, when it comes out, it's going to be ready to go. And you won't have to water as much the next summer, and your plant will be... You'll basically be cutting off a full growing season to get it really moving.
Okay. This one's from Nancy. Is it true climbing hydrangeas also flower on the horizontal as Mark described climbing roses?
No, not really. Climbing hydrangea just take a long. They have to get generally to about 8 feet tall before they'll start flowering. That's not a hard and fast rule. They can get older. You can grow them on, say, a 4 or 5 foot stump or something, and they'll kind of mound up on themselves and start flowering. But generally, it takes them, like if you're growing them on a brick, wall or on a pergola, it's usually about 8 feet before they'll even think about flowering. It's just they like to get high in a tree.
Yeah.
And so if you grow climbing hydrangeas, just give them some time. If you don't want to wait, grow what was schizophragma, but now the taxonomists are trying to lump into hydrangea. Schizophragma, the false climbing hydrangea, will flower at a much younger age, but it really prefers to be growing up before it flowers as well.
Okay. This one's from Vicky. I've been reading the book Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. He emphasizes the importance of mycorrhizal relationships. As I age, I've been moving more to raised beds and container gardening. How do I promote those mycorrhizal relationships under those circumstances?
Well, you can put a little bit of garden soil in your pots, and that'll seed them with the fungi that are in the soil naturally. That's one way.
That's one way. The problem you're going to face is you are reading a book about restoring kind of these natural associations and living biotic webs with the microorganisms and macroorganisms and the microfauna and macrofauna and all of that. And you're going to a container or a raised bed, which is purposefully a very artificial way of growing plants. And that artificial way of growing plants will grow very good plants. You grow great plants in a raised bed and in a container, but you're growing great plants kind of in spite of not having what you would have in a natural soil. And so I agree. My first thought was, put some garden soil in your pots, and that'll help some, but it's not just the mycorrhizal associations. It is all of the other, it's a whole web, and you're not capturing that whole web in a container. You just can't.
Not unless it's a really big raised bed. I mean, I can see that, but not in a pot or
really
anything.
Big raised bed with an open bottom.
Yeah, an open bottom, not
that
concrete.
Moving up from the native soils.
Nice. Okay. Faye is asking, and you may not know this, but what's the latest research on disease-resistant basil?
A little bit, like there's a Basil, which came out of some breeding work at University of Florida. I don't know a whole lot about it, but it is one that's disease resistant to powdery mildew and some of the other foliar issues that some of the sweet basils get.
You said it was called
Amazel.
Amazel.
Yeah, we had it in the trials a few times, and we actually love it and had propagated just to smell it.
It tastes
good. It's a sweet basil. It's one of the big leaf basils. Look for that one in the spring. It's a Basil.
Amazing.
It's out of University of Florida.
I don't normally grow any annual plants, but my wife wanted basil. Yeah. You know what I now know about basil? Dogs, for some reason, really want to pee on it. Interesting. Which makes it less desirable to use. It also kills it. But.
Yeah.
Okay, Carolyn's asking, when should I prune crossvine and Carolina Jessamine vines? I need to thin them out on a pergola.
They flower in late winter, early spring for the most part. So probably the ideal time to do a harder pruning would be just after they flower. At this time of the year, I would just do control pruning. That is just minor pruning to keep that aberrant growth going out here and there. And you can do that anytime. But if it's to do it anything major, I would do it probably in May or late April, right after they're pretty much done. Because again, your Gelsemium or the didn't she say Carolina Jasmine? and crossvine, those, they're both flowering February, March, and early April for the most part. So what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. All right, people. It's not rocket science here.
Yeah.
If it flowers in late winter through spring, don't do a heavy flower. Don't do a heavy pruning. Doesn't matter if it's a vine, a shrub, whatever. Don't do a heavy pruning over winter. If it flowers heavily from mid-spring later, you can prune it. Generally, you can prune most of those plants in the winter. So if they flower early in the spring, the buds are formed on woody plants are formed in the fall. If they flower later in the summer, they're formed in spring on new growth. There are a few caveats to that.
Yeah, there's always an exception.
A different way to say it that I like, my rule of thumb that I feel like it's easier for people to understand sometimes, is lean towards pruning after it flowers.
Yeah.
Like, when should you prune it? After it flowers.
Yeah, even the summer blooming things, if you don't, as long as you're not chopping things to the ground, you prune them right after they flower, they have time to put out new growth, form buds for the following year. So yeah. Exactly. All right. I think we're time is running down. So we got a bunch of questions still. We'll do lightning round questions.
We've got a couple questions.
All right.
Okay. And this one, there may not be enough information on this one, but it says my hydrangeas just stopped blooming. When do I trim? Well, we just answered that.
Have they bloom? When should they bloom? After that.
Yeah, that's the main question.
They only bloom once. And hydrangeas are one of those ones that bloom on new growth off of old growth. So if you cut them back too hard and they're not reblooming ones, you can lose the flower. So what you do is just trim them lightly, or else cut individual stems all the way to the ground over winter.
Okay. When do I plant my baby hydrangeas I raised from cuttings? They have been in pots since last September. They are about 6 inches tall and very healthy.
Perfect time.
Now.
Plant them now.
Yeah.
Okay. We have from Maryland, I have a John Clayton honeysuckle vine that has been blooming well for about 11 months a year and for maybe 10 years.
Oof.
It had grown outwards too far from its trellis on a garage wall and was shading the plants north of it. So I trimmed it back to within 12 inches of the trellis in May, and it hasn't bloomed since. Really hasn't put out hardly any new growth. Will it recover, or should I have done it at a different time of year? Or should I have fertilized it or done anything else when I pruned it?
I'm going to guess it'll probably they tend to do a lot of flushing in the spring, but I mean, that's a sempervivens.
Yeah, and my guess is it just when you cut it back, it's just putting out a lot of vegetative growth now because you cut so much. And I would think it would recover, but maybe not. There's a rule of thumb that says if something's doing amazing, just don't touch it. Get plants that'll tolerate the shade where it's shading out plants.
Too late now.
That's a beautiful plant when it's
if you can get a yellow flowered honeysuckle.
And okay.
I'd also say give it, if you did it
wait till spring and see what it does.
Give it till the spring.
Yeah.
Put out
a year, at least a year.
Yeah.
Okay. And I believe this will be our last question. It's from Anna Crawford. Pruning Aster Carolinianus.
Okay.
Do you take out the old growth or cut it back hard?
I would probably, if you're going to cut it back hard, I would do that early in the season. At this time of the year, if you're going to prune it, I would be much more selective because it's coming into bud right now. And it will flower in late October, November, and December.
But could you say cut it back hard after it flowers?
Probably.
I'll say that for you, Sophia.
Yeah, it tends to grow in relatively dry areas, at least where I've seen it in the wild. I don't know the whole extent of its range, but I would probably tend towards late winter cutting it back, just because sometimes things like that can rot out a little bit if you cut them back. But I would probably, if I were growing it, I would probably cut it back because, like I said, I like the garden to look tidy over winter. And Aster, climbing
it's
out.
Semi-evergreen, but it's not pretty.
I had planted it so it would go over a wall, and I would cut it back.
Okay.
I only did that for 2 years, but it looked great.
Perfect.
Great. So that'll do it for our horticulture hour today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of your questions. Be sure to join us next Tuesday morning at 9 for our plant lovers tour here in the garden. And we will see you next Wednesday for our midweek program on, what's next month? It's September. gardening tasks. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Take care.